Welcome back to The Legal Brief, the show where we crush the various legal myths and misinformation surrounding various areas of the gun world. I'm your host, Adam Kraut, and today we're taking a look at more federal legislation to restrict the NFA transfer process. SB Tactical, the originator of the pistol stabilizing brace, set the bar for innovation and product development in the PDW pistol category. From the insanely popular SB-M4 to the adjustable SB-A3 and even kits for pump-action firearms, SB Tactical braces are available for a wide variety of firearm platforms in fixed, adjustable, and side-folding models. To get 15% off your legally transported and carried pistol braces, use the code TGC15 over at sb-tactical.com. Last month, Virginia Congresswoman Jennifer Wexton introduced H.R. 3404, entitled the Empowering Law Enforcement for Safer Firearms Transfers Act of 2019. Getting a little lazy on the naming schemes, aren't we? The bill would amend the National Firearms Act and essentially undo the regulatory change ATF implemented in July 2016. Now, for those that don't recall or don't know, the regulatory change, known as ATF 41F, enacted a number of changes to the process in which NFA firearms were transferred. Of relevance to this particular piece of legislation was the elimination of the Chief Law Enforcement Officer, or CLEO, signature. Prior to 41F, anytime an individual submitted a Form 1, 4, or 5 to the ATF, they had to have their CLEO sign the form. Remember, that was only for individuals, not legal entities like a trust. The signature was never a permission slip as thought by some, but merely a statement that the CLEO had no information to believe the person would use the firearm in an unlawful manner, and that there was no information to believe that the possession of the firearm would violate state or local law. The bill looks to add the CLEO signature requirement back to the NFA transfer process, albeit slightly different than its predecessor. If adopted, the bill would amend the NFA to require the Secretary, which would really be the Attorney General since ATF's no longer under the Department of Treasury, or their designee, which would be ATF, to notify the CLEO of the jurisdiction where the person primarily resides that an application, so Form 1, 4, or 5, is pending. The CLEO would then have to certify that there's no objection to the transfer. Similar, but not the same, to the signature requirement previously required. Once the CLEO is notified, a 90-day period starting on the date of notification begins. During that 90 days, if the CLEO does not alert the Secretary that 1, the transferee poses a danger to themselves or others, or 2, there's a reasonable likelihood the transferee will use the firearm for unlawful purposes, the transfer will be allowed to occur. So, one of 3 things happens here. First, the CLEO is notified and certifies to ATF there's no objection to the transfer. At that point, everything would proceed as normal. Second, the CLEO is notified and takes no action during that 90-day period. After that 90-day period passes, the transfer could then be completed, assuming ATF was moving that fast, which they're not. Third, the CLEO could notify ATF that the person poses a danger to themselves or others, or they would use the firearm for an unlawful purpose. Now, I know you guys are going to ask about this, so I'll explain the process as I understand it. Once ATF receives the application, they begin to process it. At that point, they would notify the CLEO and that 90-day timer would begin. So, regardless of how long ATF takes to review your form, that 90-day timer is counting down once the CLEO is notified. For example, if it takes ATF 70 days to process your form, and the CLEO does not certify that there was no objection to the transfer, it would be another 20 days before ATF could approve the transfer, for a total of 90 days. And that's assuming that they were moving fast enough to be able to process forms within 90 days. Alternatively, if the CLEO certifies that there was no issue, that 90-day timer goes out the window. And we're just relying on how long it takes ATF to process the form. While ATF 41F did eliminate the CLEO signature, it did not remove the CLEO from the NFA process entirely. In fact, ATF's own assertion in its final rule would render this legislation meaningless. ATF said, in conjunction with the mandatory background check required of all applicants, including responsible persons of trusts and legal entities, the requirement of CLEO notice fulfills the primary objectives that have supported the certification requirement. It provides the CLEO awareness that a resident of the CLEO's jurisdiction has applied to make or obtain an NFA weapon, and affords the CLEO an opportunity to provide input to ATF of any information that may not be available during a federal background check, indicating the applicant is prohibited from possessing firearms. Put another way, the CLEO is already involved in the NFA transfer process to the extent that there's anything to add. As with other legislation we're seeing, the chances of this passing the House are greater than that of the Senate. But with mounting pressure on Republicans to Do something. This could potentially become a reality if you don't remain engaged in the political process. As I pointed out, the bill doesn't provide a CLIO with any more tools than they currently have at their disposal to object to a transfer, but would only inconvenience people with the 90-day wait if the CLIO is unresponsive. That's it for this episode. If you learned anything from the show, help us out, hit that like button, make sure you share it around with your friends. Don't forget to get subscribed if you enjoyed the video. Consider supporting us via the links down in the video description. And as always, thanks for watching. Thumbnail, stupid faces, take one.
It doesn't help when you're smiling.
That's not a stupid face? Huzzah! Okay. I see your Schwartz is as big as mine. Welcome back to the Legal Brief, the show where we... No, I know.
Yep, it's over, but don't worry, you can click on the video up top to watch last week's show, and the one below that is the one that YouTube thinks you'll enjoy. Check them out and let me know what you think.